Hey everybody, DJ Lou here, and up next we're going to review a website and kind of just go through all the particulars of branding, SEO, design, the entire thing. So let's do this. So before we start this, I do want to mention I am a Patreon user, and for those who don't know, Patreon is an outlet for creatives to allow them to collect money on all the rich content that they make. And I've been doing this free for a very long time now. And it does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. Sometimes it takes some money with some of the purchasing of this equipment. And I thought, why not throw minor subscriptions out there right now? My only tier that I make available is $1 a month. And if you do find value in the content that I make, please go ahead and subscribe. That actually will help me out tremendously. And it gives me even more motivation to put more of these videos out there. So I do want to shout out to Eric Massengale. This is his website that we're going to be reviewing today. It's Dow Oak Events, and he had posted it initially on his page, on his Facebook page, asking for reviews because he did some tweaks. And right off the bat, I started seeing people saying, "Oh, it's all caps, it's giving me a headache." And I took a look, and there's some good and there's some bad about the site. And I went directly to him and just said, "Hey, would you like a top-down review of the site? All the elements that I can kind of decipher for what you're doing, see if there's what's good, what's bad, and maybe make some improvements." And he was all for it. So I'd like to thank him for allowing me to make this video, to put it out there. So hopefully you'll be able to take some information that I critique out of this and find some value. Whether that's applying new concepts and ideas for your website or just giving you a fresh look on things. All right, so right off the bat, I'm noticing, and I'm not sure why this is, but there are some vertical lines that are appearing, and I didn't see these before, so I'm not sure if this is just an odd rendering piece, but as soon as I move the window, everything is kind of staying intact. So I don't know if there's an actual effect that's supposed to be going on about that. So that's something to think about. But let's start from the top. So the logo itself, I think, is very slick. Has a clean look, has very distinguished characters. I would maybe just change the kerning on that just a little bit so they're a little closer together. It's nothing major. It's definitely very consistent looking. And I think it's a very nice feature to start off with. On the menu side itself, you'll see that everything looks pretty solid. I'm definitely not against using all caps for a menu. I actually use that for my site. But right off the bat, when your eyes go from the menu down over to this first major image and everything, the call to action is blue. And I'm not seeing why there's a difference between using the green text with blue background on this. And if you notice also, it looks like the font choices are kind of all over the board with this. So we're definitely going with a thicker serifed font on for the logo and with the menu. But then we have Dow Oak Events, which is the brand, but that's in different text than the other. So one of the very first suggestions I would make to everybody is, especially anytime that you're using your own name, unless it's like pure body of the context of the site or whatever literature you're using, try to stick with the same formula for your font choices. And whether that's also sizing and all that, try to keep that as similar as possible, because now my eyes immediately see that difference right off the bat. And like I said, this unfortunately seems kind of like a jumble of fonts. We have kind of this this etching around this text is much wider for wedding DJ and photo booth rental. That's fairly actually distracting for me. And then affordable entertainment. Again, another different font choice. It might be scaled from this one, but it definitely looks like the spacing in between is different. And then the request a quote, again, looks very small comparatively. Definitely doesn't look like it shares the same characteristics of the menu or anything. So there's nothing wrong with doing different fonts throughout the site. However, I would try to stay consistent within the first couple fonts, especially if you're using, for your branding perspective, that same font where possible. And then if you're going to use a body font and then some type of highlight font, that kind of works. But as soon as you start getting the 4 or 5 or more fonts, that really kind of starts, at least visually, kind of making it kind of a mismatch. So I would definitely change that. And again, I'm not sure what's up with these white lines that are going through it. That's just, it's very odd. So next, this is what I call USP, a unique sales proposition. The youngest, best value DJ company in North Carolina. I honestly, I don't like the way it flows. What does youngest have to do with anything? I mean, if you're selling kind of a youth brand, then I guess I could kind of understand that. But you know, it loses its punch. It loses what I think is maybe being tried to say. Hey, you know, we're just not some old people DJing, and I'm an old person. I'm 45. And I think I'm very good value in that regard. So I don't know. There's nothing technically wrong with it, but I would also try to approach that in a different way. It's just, I'm just not 100% sold on that. This image is fine. I would dare say it'd be a little bit better if it was cropped a little bit more, so you actually saw the faces of the people just a little bit more in the photo. But the photo is fine. But you know, it does match the flavor of, okay, here's Dow Oak Events, here's the youngest group, as Eric claims in this, and here's a picture of everybody. So I guess it works, but I would maybe crop that image a little bit more. Award-winning DJ services. Okay, I've made it known to a few people over the years. I've never been a big fan of promoting the Knot and Wedding Wire. Because especially if you're paying for advertising or anything like that, now not only you're paying a chunk of your money for those ads and whatnot, but then you're also giving them free advertisement on your site. And especially these are links to the site. At least they are opening into a new window. Yeah, I personally would not use this. Now, if that's part of your strategy, if your sales technique is mentioning the awards that you have won between these services, that's fine. And there are some people I know who completely hate Wedding Wire and Knot from that regard. And the awards are a dime a dozen, and they frown on it. I'm indifferent, I guess. Again, personally, I just wouldn't use them. I don't like this. As soon as I get to this section and I scroll down, all this is gray. So now I've gone from some fairly bright color, at least within the menu. You have your color photo of everybody around. But then as soon as I scroll, this is very monotone. It's very dreary. And I just personally don't like it from a contrasting point of view. We went from fun and excitement to dreary and bland. So I would kind of change it up. I would, if you are going to use the logos and all that, I would go probably full color. They do have specific colors that tie into their brand, and it may be distinguishable for people hitting the site. And that's a preferential choice, to be sure. One thing, as you notice, as you scroll down, the menu does resize, and I think the logo does get a little bit lost in this. I would at least increase that a little bit, even though your name was up front and center initially. Especially when you have new clients coming through, they might not necessarily remember you right off the bat. And having a slightly more distinguished logo that's always kind of in front, I think works to your advantage. That's just something kind of to note. So now this is what a lot of people initially complained about. All the the text choice. Yeah, I'm definitely not feeling it, unfortunately. So let's start off from the top here at Dow Oaks Events. We believe everyone deserves the best for their wedding or event. Okay, I mean, this is kind of your mission statement and all. It's generally fine, but at a minimum, I would put this in somewhat smaller text. This should be, I think, considered more body text as opposed to just this massive, just super highlighted area It's and getting a little bit more into the message. Keeping our pricing as low as possible. There's nothing wrong with pursuing the budget-minded, the budget-conscious couples. But that being said, selling value, but then we're also cheap as well. I don't want to say cheap, but we're inexpensive as well. We're low cost. I think it's almost kind of a mixed message. I mean, I personally, unless that's again the sales technique that you're looking for, and that is the consistent message that you're going with, I would probably reword it at least a little bit. Again, I think this is just it's a bit of text for a mission statement, and the mission statement doesn't necessarily have to be on the front page. I don't know if this paragraph in itself sells me on the company, and that's always a thing that you need to think about. Don't think it from the DJ perspective. I've created so many sites over the years for private business, public, government, the works, and even I have a tainted view in this. So always think about when you're pushing content out there that this makes sense for that potential bride, for that potential groom, for that potential couple that's coming to the site. Does everything that I put on here translate into my message, my sales approach, what I'm offering in a very concise and clear method? I would retweak this. I would definitely choose a different font. I wouldn't highlight it nearly as much. I would put this more as straight body text that isn't highlighted with something very much in the background that makes it stick out more. I think it's just too much right off the bat. Now, I am such a proponent of using testimonials on your site. My site is littered with this on all my main pages. I always try to find the most relevant testimonials to that page. Like my mixtape page has specific content. I'm not an iPod DJ. I mix songs perfectly by this one couple's statement. So I'm always trying to find that content that applies directly to the page. This, I think, is good. What's a little bit weird. So first off, you have a picture in the background of a photo booth. You're supposed to be selling the idea of excitement, and value and whatnot. I don't know if a picture booth, which looks like somebody with a red fro and some oversized glasses and an oversized tie, I don't know if that sells it. It's very faint, and it's color. So here's the one splash of color in the site. But I think in the end, I would use a different background photo. Personally, with mine, I actually apply the photo of that couple as the background of that testimonial. Now, you don't have to go to that extent, but I wanted that kind of more one-to-one relationship of this is the couple and this is what they said, or something of that event from that particular testimonial. But as we see up top and bottom here, this is what I would call normally white space, but it actually has things in the background. And I think between this font selection was actually pretty small for the testimonial. It's actually a bit long for the testimonial too. So we're talking, I think it's four testimonials. It's all great, but it's a bit of overload, especially selling right off the bat. Especially with the font choices that are used, it's just, I think it's a touch too much. So what I do, and you don't have to do what I do, of course, but I actually summarize, I truncate the best bits of that testimonial in these larger pieces. I think it's more effective because naturally the whole idea of a website, this goes for anybody selling a kind of service like this. You're not converting them on your site, most likely. I've had some say your site's awesome or your content was great or whatever, and we're ready to book you right off the bat. You want them to get you to that phone call, to that email exchange, to that Skype, to that face-to-face, whatever the case may be. So try to do it in the most minimal perspective, so they have the easiest amount of time to digest the information that's there, and then be able to kind of process and say, hey, you know, this all kind of makes sense to me. Let me go ahead and contact. So I would scale down these testimonials. You don't have to, but I think it's a little bit of overload. Just below that, you know, we're at another paragraph. Again, a gray background, but we are getting at least into some more color, and we're about in the middle of the page right now. And I'm doing this all live, by the way, so I haven't read this paragraph fully through. Yeah, throughout the last 2 years, we've tripled employee count. How always think about this. How does this sell your company? Is the concept of growth a selling point to the couple? It may be, but I think this is a little bit more fluff than anything. I think that in order to, again, to capture that couple in the quickest way, talking about whether it's the equipment you specifically use, unless you're actually talking a very specific article about the equipment that you're using, how you're specifically growing on all that. That definitely shouldn't at least be on the front page, unless, again, that's your kind of selling technique or selling idea. I personally wouldn't do that, but that, again, is what I would do. This is okay. This, you know, I think with the proper trimming of this paragraph, it could work better. And again, font choices, no all caps, no all caps. Choose a nice, consistent font. Personally, I like sans serif for body text. I think it flows better on the eyes when you're reading more text. I think the serifed fonts, like the logo and the menu, has a nice crisp and bold appeal to that. So very short, very succinct. BAM can take those serifed fonts. But for constant body reading, I think the sans serif works better. But again, that's just what my opinion is on that. If you're a growing team, again, growing team, I guess it's more fine here. You've now distinguished that you're growing, and you don't need to necessarily talk about it twice. I didn't want to jump into a profile yet, and I guess that background where this is repeated on the other page, so I guess that's actually part of the design. I think this is fine, having the quick profile. Cameron's photo, I would crop a little bit more, so everybody looks a little bit more even-steven into the shot. But I think this is fine. And as we can see, you know, we just jumped onto the one page that had their bio. I think that's fine. Next paragraph. So right off the bat, if I'm a couple, I'm exhausted at this point. I know you're a wedding DJ. I know that you're a growing company. But where have you wowed me to go ahead and you know, seek out the information, give you a phone call, send you an email, whatever. We're at halfway point of the first page, and again, while I think again the testimonials are awesome, and I think every single person. As an aside, I'm going to talk about this in some of my other material out there. But especially with sites like WeddingWire or not, Google, Facebook, you never know if their policies are going to change about how they collect their reviews and all that, or how they'll display it. You get places like Yelp that has their algorithm that hides sometimes a majority of reviews if they don't have a certain count and whatnot. So I highly recommend when you go and get those reviews, make sure you duplicate those reviews on your site, because if that site disappears tomorrow, you know, we already know WeddingWire and The Knot has merged. Who knows what happens between the brands in the future? One could disappear, and I know I've got more reviews on one than I have on another. So always copy that information locally. You can tell that, hey, this was a WeddingWire review, hey, this was a Facebook review, whatever the case may be. But own your content at every step of the way, because again, you never know how somebody will ultimately change that up. So some of the ways we've been able to keep our costs low. So again, you're approaching the budgetary side, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think this paragraph is generally fine, but if say this paragraph out loud as if you were trying to sell to a customer. Is this the way that you would approach it? Is this the way that you would talk to it? And I'm not even saying necessary just for this paragraph, but anything that you're putting again up on your site. How does this sell your service, your concepts, your ideas? How does this approach it? So always kind of remember that. Have a look at our award-winning services. Okay, I'm generally fine with this. I think we got a little too dark. We went from the white to kind of gradient down, where we went to that very murky gray side. Now we're on a very dark side. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that kind of contrast. I think it definitely can stick out and all that. I would say like photo booth rental, drop the rental because I think it's just taking out too much space. DIY DJ rental. I don't know if I would put this as part of the main part of the site. Maybe if you have a true rental service that you're providing that you use as kind of a sub-menu kind of thing where you kind of put that out there. But, in the end, who is your target customer? Try not to be super broad where you're hitting the rental side of the equation and also couples. And I find this also with some DJs who do weddings and like corporate and all that. If you have a significant part of your income that's coming from one or the other, that should be generally your focus. If you're kind of 50-50, I would actually create two parts of your site. So you would have, let's say, your logo, wedding services, corporate and other, whatever the case may be, school dances, whatever. But I would distinguish the brand and distinguish the content so it's much more specific to what whether they're a couple, whether they're a school function kind of thing going on. Just shape that up a little bit more so there's more direction and more focus. We've served in areas, I actually do this myself where I've actually put in venues that I've worked in certain areas and made a regional landing page on my site. So for instance, Catskills Wedding DJ, I put in, I want to say it was like 8 or 9 different venues that I've worked in the area and focused some content around the Catskills. And that particular page usually places like 2nd or 3rd, sometimes 4th with that search. So nothing wrong with keyword seeding per se. This is technically keyword seeding. You're trying to get people to say Greensboro, wedding events or something like that. And, there's a natural attention to that because that focus keyword is there. But that being said, that doesn't always amount to, a proper, result that you're hoping to find. So Google has gone so much different in SEO with how they're applying things, how the results are coming up. All the results are much more customized now. Locals considered into the equation. So again, there's nothing technically wrong with it. Make sure you're, as I think this is actually done fairly well. You got beautiful views of the city. I think it's a great use of photos. It keeps the idea that these are the major points of area, and it's broad. I used to live in North Carolina. I used to live in Cary, so you got Raleigh. I'd almost put Raleigh and Durham in there, but that's just me. Winston-Salem all the way down to Asheville and Charlotte. So you're covering the whole gamut of the area. What was it, 40 down to 85 or something like that? Now I'm trying to remember all my roads. But I think it's a good use of it. I would maybe change the font maybe slightly bigger because it's not centered as I would anticipate. I think it's just a little bit of poor use of that bit of space right there. And again, regular case, you don't have to go uppercase on everything. You put your information request form, that's fine, but hey, this is bad. You got to make sure that your mouse overs at least submit. If you're going to change a color, change the background color or something. Don't leave that on a white text. For the record, this is a Mac using Chrome, and we could theoretically test this out on a couple others, but it would probably be the same. And this is actually a good use of for form collection. You're not asking for a lot of information, and I cringe at some of the people that will put multi-page forms, basically trying to do a point of sale for wedding services, or any kind of DJ or photography service, in that matter. Your idea, again, is not to completely define what they want from your webpage. The point of the matter, at least, again, my approach, is what's the minimal amount of steps somebody needs to get to reach you. They've liked your content, they saw a video, they saw a social post or whatever. What is that path to get to there? Is it easy for them to translate what you're doing to share with? It's an experiential thing that they're going through. Is it something that they're going to see a value and then fill out that form? So kudos for keeping the form pretty short in this case. So now we're at the footer, and we have main address, services, servicing. Okay, you got your submenus. That's generally fine. I would probably ditch the rest of this. I would move booking up over to DAO Oak Events. I would just dump the image because I don't think this really adds much value to it in the end. And for social shares, I would probably actually dump the count on it. A lot of these social counters don't always work. Right now, if I'm hitting your site, I'll be like, oh, okay, they got 160 followers on LinkedIn, but nothing on Facebook, nothing on Twitter. Who are these people? Nothing on YouTube. You do have a good IG profile, though, so that's nice. There are some out there that will allow you to show the count on specific properties, and I would only do that to your high value properties, and then use ones that just show the logo, say for like a Facebook in this case, because this count is not working. I know Twitter, I had something similar in mine, and the Twitter counter broke. I think it's just the way Twitter is broadcasting out that information just no longer applies. So don't try to, be mindful of how some of these third-party tools ends up representing your brand, because right now, okay, yeah, you got a cool IG profile, you got some followers. What about your rest of your presence? Oh, okay, LinkedIn, business, okay, whatever. Everything else looks dead. That's not to, of course, say that it's dead, but just that appearance shows that. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. So that was the main page. Let's take some quick looks here before we jump into the rest of the page loads and all that. So we're going to go to GTmetrix, which is a great little tool to help analyze and see where some of your strengths and weaknesses are. And let's check the value of this. All right, so we have a performance report, and unfortunately, you could definitely be doing some improvements on the main page. So I'm assuming this is WordPress. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't look at the source code on this, but optimize images, enable gzip compressions are actually very simple fixes. If you are using WordPress, there are tools that are out there that will do gzip compression right in that tool. It'll also do bulk image optimization on top of all that. In general, my score right now is like 92 or 93 on page speed, and like in the lower mid 70s on wide slow. Those are usually pretty good numbers. Your page load itself is actually pretty decent, 2.3 seconds with a fairly heavy front page, 5.5 megs. You could probably do certain things also, like resizing images like this, making sure that the images that you're using are not scaled down in WordPress, but you're actually using a properly sized picture coming into it to begin with. So this way you don't have to worry about scaling and stuff like that. It's not trying to load a larger image. And of course, that's more important, especially for things like mobile. You want to keep it as light as possible. So definitely try to do things like that. If we look at wide slow, these are all going to be pretty standard add expires headers. There are plugins out there that allow you to do that. It doesn't always work though. Mine sometimes flakes out and doesn't work as well. Again, I think just gzip compression will be a great tool. And just for giggles, because I've totally forgotten what my tool that I'm using. I use WP Fastest Cache. So there is a free version and a paid version. The paid version does some additional minimization of your HTML, of JavaScript, of CSS code, and actually the more compact that you can make everything, it takes all the line breaks out and all that. It just makes for a quicker load. So you want to look for a tool like WP Fastest Cache. There's plenty of others that are out there, and there's a WP Fastest Cache that is free. I would definitely say take advantage of that. If you're using something like Wix or something like that, I honestly don't know what's out there anymore. It's one of those platforms that's not as widely supported from a larger community, where WordPress has been around for so long. There are so many different plugins, some good, some bad. And you can go plug in crazy if you don't think twice about it. So something to be mindful of. But this page speed, especially your page speed score, can be drastically improved just by a couple tweaks. Now let's go ahead, before we dive in a couple more pages, I want to see how we're doing on SEO on this page. Let's see how the results are coming in. So first, let's of course check for brand. Right off the bat, we're good. You got your Facebook page, your Wedding Wire pages, not Yelp, your Twitter. So, you're dominating your brand, which is good. Even for me, because of the city Paris, and there's actually some initiatives out there called Paris Creative or Creative Paris. I'm always in a little bit of a battle to make sure that I just dominate everything with that brand. I still always am on top, but sometimes some of that information can sneak in. So, especially since you have what seems to be a much more unique name, it definitely makes things a little bit easier, but kudos to make sure that you have that. Now let's try some more broad things. So let's try Wedding DJ North Carolina. And Google Maps is always going to be, the local and the 3-pack. It's going to depend where exactly you are. We'll get that in a more quick sec here. We got DJ Bun, who's dominating in the industry, all around rally, stylist, expertise, Morse, CWDJ. So nothing on Dow. I'll take another look on this really quick for page 2. So not on page 1 or page 2 for North Carolina, and that might not necessarily be super important, but because Eric here is covering basically a large part of the state, at least the central part all the way down from Charlotte, at least to like Raleigh and Asheville and whatnot. It's a pretty large chunk. So getting that placement, at least the top 2 pages, I believe is just overly critical. You can hit page 3 and page 4 and get some results. So some of the biggest tweaks I could already see right now, you do have one mention of North Carolina in here. You do also have some of the cities that are around, and you do have North Carolina one more time. The biggest thing is going to be making sure that you're getting some link backs to your site. Links are still, whether fortunate or unfortunately, very important still in the world of SEO. So try to get what you can. So you're based out of Greensboro, so let's really get super localized here and just go Wedding DJ Greensboro. So you're already part of the 3-pack. You're already dominating the area. That's awesome. Let's see where you are organically. Down. DJ PC, and you're on first page organically. So you definitely your local presence is definitely working to your advantage, as it should, and you probably don't need any other improvements there. always keep an eye out on your major properties, your Facebooks, your Googles, your Wedding Wires, your Knots. Always just making sure that if you have any tweak, any address change or anything like that, that's applied. So that's always a consistent. I made the fatal error one time. I was actually going to start changing my name from Paris Creative to DJ Lou Paris / Paris Creative. And I did it about halfway through and I changed my mind. So it was a lot of effort making all these changes and then making them back. So just making sure that anybody that makes a change of brand, of location, that there are some fairly easy ways. Sometimes it'll cost a little bit of money. Moz Local, for instance, can get your site out there to all the major players, making sure all that's consistent. I think that cost somewhere around 70 to 100 bucks. I think it was like 80 bucks when I used it, but it just makes sure it verifies what's out there. If there's any differences, it changes it all up. With especially as many sites that are out there, it's so worth the effort in that case. But so Eric's definitely doing good in his local location, but let's check one of these cities that he normally does. So let's do Raleigh. And it definitely makes sense that he doesn't exist in the 3-pack, because there's no, at least on the website, there's no physical address at these locations either. So, don't be surprised they don't show up in a 3-pack from that. But let's see if we get anywhere with organic. Nothing on page 1. And nothing on page 2. And this is not uncommon, especially for especially the larger multi-ops that are trying to operate out of multiple locations. And there's some strategies to think about. And for instance, you can set up Google My Businesses to have remote offices with one central location. There, especially if you find that people are querying for specific areas. Like in this area, I know some people will query for Hudson Valley Wedding DJ, but then we'll also do like Poughkeepsie Wedding DJ, Kingston Wedding DJ, and whatnot. The same applies here, where if your major focus are, let's say, these major 6 markets within North Carolina, and of course there's lots of smaller areas around as well. There are some slight things that you can do. It won't always, help. Google My Business is by far the most valuable piece in it, because Google will weigh that more than pretty much anything else that you're applying. The flip side is, if you do have some landing pages about the area, and then you talk about, and again, like my Catskills Wedding DJ strategy, having some venue names, having some testimonials that are specific to the area, making it basically like a landing page for that area, you could gain some value out of it. It could be a challenge, because this is a somewhat crowded market to reach that. But at least from a search strategy, if you want to improve in those areas, that's definitely something that you can do. But overall, I would say SEO, I've seen many sites that are unfortunately not ranking for whether it's the 3-pack or the first couple pages, even sometimes with their own brand, because sometimes they have a more difficult brand name that they're working with. But at least in this case, Eric here is doing well in this. All right, so let's quickly go through a couple more things before we dump out. So contact. So we already had the main contact on the initial page, and we also have contact right after this for the next link. Maybe move contact over to the right. I think it distinguishes it a little bit more. But you're basically repeating the same information. There's nothing necessarily bad with that. And again, we have that issue of the text in the button definitely needs to be changed up. Again, I think the footer, could use some improvement. Definitely nothing wrong with using Google Maps in this case. I have found an interesting thing with mine. I decided to do kind of like a pin map of all the locations I've ever been in. And I'm trying to remember, I think it's in my About page. And it just gives kind of a more breadth to people that, hey, you know, I've been to a lot of places, I've worked with a lot of people. It just kind of gives a visual expanse of what's capable. So having, the North Carolina and surrounding area kind of being littered with these pins could be quite interesting. And not just have just where the location is. And it's not centered. You can, depending on which plugin this is. I know with my Divi theme, this is actually a built-in part of the theme, and you can tell at the center that. But if you can, I would try to do that just so visually it's there. Let's go over to About Us. And again, we went to a little bit more monotone look, and you're repeating this, all the awards and all that. And I'd almost say if you're going to put these on, I think they would be more effective in the About Us than the homepage. Again, I'm not a fan of them in the first place, but that's just my personal thing. To see how we come to be such a large and highly rated DJ company as quickly as we have, you need to understand the owner. And we get into, so you don't like to watch TV. I don't really get to watch much TV either. But this is almost a bit, it's personal, but it's also, it's almost a little checklisty kind of thing. I think things that you like to do work. Okay, you're selling the experience. You're selling yourself in this case. I think that, and I will give an example here of what I do. And again, just take this for what it's worth. I actually decided to have an About page, and I decided to go almost storyline with this, about my past, what made me really be into music, what path that I kind of took getting there. How the company was born and morphed and changed, and what makes me unique. I think if you're going to use a space like this to sell yourself, make sure it's the best pitch in the way that you're approaching it. So if you're doing it from a comedic standpoint, if you're doing it from a trust me standpoint, if you're doing it from a here's my list of accolades and all those are valid ways to kind of approach it. But I think, and also this aligning your images off with the text, it's not clean in this regard, and the picture is actually quite large. You could be using the space more effectively with a little bit smaller picture, and I think, and again, there's no technical right or wrong way to approach this. But I would put a more personal spin on this, a more experiential side of what it is to be you. What made you start this company? What made you hire these people? What made you want to grow? And you do that to a little bit in this one paragraph, but I think there's a more personalized approach to it. I think the more personal that you can get if you're taking this approach, I think that adds value, and it speaks to your character, and it speaks to your personality right off the bat. And I think trying to shape and sell your personality in your site is a big thing. And there's very clever ways to do it. There's very subtle ways to do it without being super overt or over the top. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with this. I just don't think that if I'm a wedding couple coming in and it's like, oh, you don't like to play video games. Well, if you happen to run into somebody who likes to play video games, you might be a big gamer and all that, and you're like, all right, we're not going to relate. I'm not going to relate to this guy at all, and that's it. There goes the conversation. This is not, of course, to say this will happen, but any of those opportunities where you are super defining yourself without putting a super personal spin around it. How did you get to this point? How did you approach this? I think that you have the potential for losing a lead or whatnot by being either so specific, it's just like, I'm this, not this, and telling more a story about yourself. So I would go with that. Yeah, I definitely didn't like the whole money floating from the side. I thought that was, yeah, you could do better than that. Um, Not saying there's anything wrong with other wedding DJs. And this is, especially from a main page, I would never talk negative or really even about the competition. And just from a clarity standpoint, this area that I work in, there's tremendous DJs and their outfits that are in this area, and I personally recommend so many. When I, especially me being a single op, I will refer those to others. I don't think that, at least with the main pages, unless you're doing like a real true comparison, A/B kind of thing, that there's any reason to even talk about the competition. This is you. This is your service. From the main page, you're selling on cost and the value that you offer, and you don't have to put any other business or even mention them from that perspective. Again, that's just my approach. Again, reading your content, but pull off what we had. Some had to be done. Not saying we reinvented the wheel. It's almost braggadocious the way it's doing. I would almost basically just dump this whole line. Talk about the value that you offer. I would even, this paragraph below, to sum up our pricing structure without getting any secrets. We choose not to reveal. Okay, if you don't want to reveal your pricing, there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely two schools of thought of listing your pricing and not. I personally list it because I unfortunately don't have the time to talk to all the potential customers out there, and there's definitely a segment of customers that just unfortunately just can't afford my services. And with that, I think that's the right approach for me. Not having your price on there, especially in this case with Eric, because he is driving this more from a value proposition of lower cost, does make sense. But I wouldn't even get into the hyper details of, this is secret sauce and, the DJs are going to just imitate us. And I think it's not necessary. I think there's a definite different strategy that one can approach to grab the attention of the couple, make them feel that right off the bat that they're getting a good value from what they see on your site and all that, but without having to overbrag about yourself. If you want to talk about the value and all that and be in a more braggadocious mind, put your past referral. If you have a past referral that speaks specifically to the value that you've added, that Eric's service was far beyond an inexpensive service and was absolutely amazing. You find the content like that, this is where it belongs. Make your clients, your past clients, sell your service. As a matter of fact, it's just talking about my service. I go over to my pricing page. I keep it simple. I only have my 2 core packages plus a couple add-ons. But right off the bat, while I have a little bit of text in there, right off, above and beyond our expectations, honestly, we felt that we should have paid him not only as a DJ, but day of coordinator, amazing day of, this gives you so much more validation with your couples, that another couple is coming in and saying this. And when you can condense that to a paragraph or a sentence that truly reflects your brand, what you offer, the amazing service that you provided for them, that is what sells. Not this, we've got secret sauce and people are going to imitate us and we didn't reinvent the wheel, but we redid this anyways. And you don't need to go. I personally would not go that approach. I would go the approach, and you already started doing this on the main page, and I would do this for every page. And I would recommend any service out there. I don't care if you're in a wedding service. I don't care if you're a plumber, whatever. The more that your clients talk about you, the more that you are getting validation beyond what you're trying to sell to somebody. I personally take the approach, I don't need to sell myself. I'll have my past clients speak for me. I will talk about, some of the differentiators that I do. I'll talk about what makes me tick and all. But in the end, the real sell comes from my past clients and what they say about me. And I think, that has been very successful. I've actually had clients directly tell me that the way that they saw my site and they saw these, pop outs of these testimonials just stood out and just immediately sold them on at least talking to me. So that's the way I would personally approach it. Try not to be so braggadocious with what you've done. And I'm sure you've made an amazing company. You've definitely grown and all that. And you can talk about some of that growth, but I would also reel that in and let the clients do the talking as well, where you can. I'm going to services real quick. I'm sorry this is a little bit long-winded, but I wanted to give a very thorough review of Eric's site. Again, I can't stress enough of the color differences and all this. Let's try to make this consistent as possible. DJ Services photo booth rental. And this looks like the exact same photo that was used on the front. I would always try, if you're going to use photos on your site, to use unique photos where possible. Again, size them up as best as you can, so this way they're as small as they can be. So go for quicker loads, but try to make everything as unique and something inviting for each one. DJ Services, okay, you need a picture of controller. Ooh, it's a Tractor S4. At least it looks like a Tractor S4, but and somebody who's looks like a rolled up dress shirt. And some messy cables. I don't think I would use this particular photo in this instance. DJ rental, you've got the excitement photo for your rental service. If anything, the excitement photo belongs with your main service that you're doing. And the same thing goes with the photo booth rental. Again, I would change it to just photo booths or something to that effect. Maybe get a crowd of more exciting people. Just again, a little bit more diversity and all that. Event lighting, I think, is fine. It's an elegant photo of what you're offering. Let's dump into DJ services really quick. Let's just see how this is kind of broken out. We're back to profiles. So we went from profiles that were on the main page. We're now in the profiles of, and this is a couple in deep, so DJ services and then the profiles. I'd almost would dare say this really kind of belongs in the about us. You're talking about us, and these I think where everybody should. Let's just look at about us again for a second here. It's meet the owner is not about us per se. It's about the owner. It could be about Eric in this case if you want to have a true focus on the owner in this case, which is Eric. Maybe change that, or start off with a little bit more encapsulated summary of what makes Eric tick in this case, and then having below the other people that are part of the service. I think that'd be a better approach. And again, this, I hate to say it, but the font choices, not only all caps, but like we got for big cap to little cap. Some of them have emphasis on the first letter cap, and it's just, we definitely need, I think, a much better approach on that. It's not just a team of wedding DJs, there's an art to being an event host. So this is okay. And I always would say if you're doing numbers 1 through 10, always spell them out. I think it's just a little bit more classy to do that. If you ever get into like AP or Chicago style writing, that's the route that they go. And again, the focus on affordable rate. And again, if the whole sales focus is affordability, is the price point, then there's nothing wrong with that. Do that emphasis. But if you also are somebody who, and even like me, I started at an affordable rate, a really competitive rate, and I grew beyond that with once my capabilities and my confidence had grown, and thanks to a couple DJs, David Nazario in particular, shout out to him for pushing me over the edge to be like, no, you offer more than you expect or that you're asking for. So again, nothing wrong with selling from affordability. Put it in where you can, make sure that it's the selling point makes sense with the rest of your approach in that and talk. Ooh. Training. Guess what? Don't care. If I'm a couple, I don't care. And it's not that training is not important. I know training, especially for a multi-op, is such a critical thing. If you're going to talk about it, you can literally have our DJs have gone through an extensive training process that we devised, ensuring the highest quality service, something to that effect. That's it. This kind of starts out from a training talk to a little bit more broad, and then gets kind of brought back into training. I think it's too much. And definitely, okay, so we're in DJ services, so we're one deep in, and we're using, we got a huge image here on the left-hand side, it's almost 50-50 split, and a lot of text on the right that doesn't have a lot of finality to it per se. It just kind of rambles a bit. Then we get into style, and it's too much, and I would rethink this whole thing by a really good summary of what makes Dow Oaks better than everybody else. And again, not necessarily from a braggadocious perspective. Throw those client reviews in here. Again, I cannot stress that I think a client review should be on every one of your main landing pages. They're helping to sell your service. In the end, the more that you're forcing people to read, and you're giving them eye exhaustion from trying to process it, and you could potentially lose people from it. Now, they may have already signed up from the main page, and that's fine, but all this effort put into this content is really not going anywhere, especially where it's not condensed. It's not giving you a lot of focus on it. This is actually kind of deeply hidden now. At that point, I would I would kind of rethink it. And also with your menu, sorry that I scrolled up really quick here, but with your menu, you probably should have a drop down here, because first you have to click on services, then you have to click on DJ services, and you're making them do actions in between those. So having a drop down that gives you DJ services, your photo booth rentals, and whatnot, I think gives you value. You can still have, if somebody clicks on that, have your breakdown of your images in each section, but that's the way I would approach that part. Equipment, and you already heard me say about this, no couple cares about equipment. If they do, it's because one of them happened to know a DJ, or they were in some type of music program at some point, or knows a little something about a mixing board or something. Each ceremony system comes with a lapel. Well, what happens if you ever change that? What if you do an over-the-ear microphone? What if you have a bigger production and want to do a boom microphone? It's too much detail. It's too much fluff. It's talking about a service that, from a couple's perspective, all they want to make sure is this is being captured. It's being captured in a nice, discreet way that sounds great, and I don't have to think twice about it. So, talking about frequencies, is highly important to us in the DJ community. Talking about this in your DJ services that's being exposed to your couples, unless you're personally seeking out this information. And no joke, I actually had one couple just a couple weeks ago hit my microphones and frequencies article for DJs only. So, but they knew exactly what they were getting into. They just hunted around my site. They actually found it really interesting. They talked about it in my meeting. That's 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, or even more. So it's just not worth having this as your again, this is your selling point. This is, people are still researching about you and all that. They don't give a damn about frequencies. So I would completely dump that. Planning, I think, is a very important topic, but I think you can condense all of this into 4 distinct paragraphs as opposed to 4 major sections. I think you can probably boil all these down into a very nice, just a very easy approach that, our planning service has been proven to yada, yada, yada. You get to equipment. I would actually, dump equipment. Style, our style is unique because such and such, or, we have this stable of DJs with different styles to address, exactly what you like. whatever that case may be. Talk about your sales approach without necessarily just selling yourself in the process. And if you can put reviews embedded in here, again, I think I think that's the winning approach. This is definitely not the winning approach. I definitely don't want to be harsh or anything, but if I was a couple and somehow landing on this page and I start seeing training and I'm like, bye, done. So that's the way I would approach it. Let's jump over to playlists. I'm assuming the rest of the services are going to be kind of broken out like that. Condense, keep it nice, short, and sweet. Nothing necessarily wrong with having some playlists out there. The text choice on here, though, I can barely read a damn thing on it. This really does not get me far. And again, what does this offer value to the customers in the end? I would say not. I would rather see a mix up there. And I know some people were like, no, never put a mix up there. There's copyright issues, and I've got a huge topic on copyright and all. But in the end, you're selling your style, your technique. It's a little bit easier for me being a single op. So what you see is what you get from me. This is a little bit different having multiple DJs. But in the end, while it's okay, I just don't see any value. I'd be actually really interested to see if Eric is using Google Analytics, how many people have actually gone to these pages and kind of dove through, and how long they stayed on those pages. Would be very interesting. And finally, we got blog. And I think blogs are highly, highly important. I think the more content that you're able to get out to your clients, whether you're seeding that through emails to them, if your SEO is good enough where these articles are getting in front of them before you see them. I've had a lot of couples, and even not necessarily in this area, like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, who landed on my "What Does a Wedding DJ Do" article, and that is, luckily, usually number 1 or number 2 on Google search. And then they went and saw some of my other content, and I've had long distance weddings from that. Even had one couple who didn't hire me. They're a very long distance. They were out in California, but we still keep in touch. It's really interesting. So the more concise content that you can put out there, I think adds value, incredible value to your business and to your potential clients. And definitely make sure that, while you have in here, The Wedding That Started It All, great title. I think that it's approachable. It makes me want to dive into it. Mary and James Blake, okay. If you're doing this whole write-up on this, what do we got? We got an image. We got a these are very, and I'm on a 300 meg connection, and that took a good few seconds to load up, so way too large of an image in there. Great that you are linking back to other vendors. I think that is a habit that all of us wedding vendors really need to get in the habit of. I think it creates that relationship even more, because now we're lifting each other up from a search perspective and all that by giving each other a little bit of cred. This is generally fine. I would definitely scale down those images quite a bit. And, if you're going to put something up here, it is a little thin. So if you are going to put something up there, I would put a bit more extensive piece on it. Google will, if your content is too thin, if it thinks that only this one paragraph is just not enough, that can actually devalue your entire site overall. Doesn't necessarily mean it will. But the more content that you have that isn't being applied in a more global sense, that like, oh, hey, here's this story about this, there could be some negative things. Now, I used to, for my reviews, I would post up each individual person. I would try to write up a short paragraph, a couple images. I've decided I changed this up, and this is to the whatever approach that you want to take. I encapsulate the entire year on a single page now, so it makes the page definitely more dense. It's definitely a lot to read, but this is purely from a review perspective, so it's none of my personal content. I actually do a quick year in review video, which sits on top, and then each one of these places you can jump to. This also helps with SEO because I'm putting the name of the place and the location in there. That's internally linked. Internal links is great for SEO. You want to try to do that as much as you can. I really have not seen much in the way of internal links on Eric's site. That is something you want to take some part into. But for the way I do it, I just put verbatim what that couple's experience was. I put a small image in there. As much as I would like to put tons and tons of images, if I'm putting 15, 20 images for a year's worth of things, it's going to make that page very heavy to load. So I'd just rather keep the small image in there. Sometimes I will not get a couple's photo, like I did not get Kristen and Kyle's right away. So I just put up a photo of the location, and then like Larissa and Deepak, that I did. So anytime I can get a photo, I throw it in there. But in the end, I think that if you're going to write a blog, write it extensive, and what I mean by extensive is more than just one paragraph. Try to get at least 2, 3, 4 paragraphs in there. If you're going to visually tell a story, make sure those images are succinctly put in there, not too large, that they make kind of sense. Like this one overhead shot of this DJ, I don't think that adds value. This ceremony shot I think is awesome. That's a great shot to have in here. These shots, I think, again, you're leading off with the same image, so you've repeated things twice. One super large, and one might be the exact same size, but just scaled down. This is a fun shot. I think those work pretty well. But if you're going to tell a visual story, make sure you're kind of keeping those, keeping the concept that things need to be compact, that message needs to be said about it that makes sense. Tell a story. Don't get too wordy on it, and make it worthwhile. If somebody hits this page, if somebody happened to come in from another vendor, let's say this Officiant Jack, they came in from Jack's site and just happened to hit this page, it makes sense about this wedding. Oh, let me check out more about Dow Oak, and then work around that. So that's the way I would approach the blog. And that's about it. And again, I'm not sure why the social piece is up here in the base image. This really kind of crowds everything. Plus you already have social sharing on the side as well. So I would turn this off on your blog posts and all, or maybe force it all the way down onto this page at the footer. But it's taking up way too much space for this particular page. All right, so we're going to wrap this up because this one is definitely taking a little longer than I initially expected. So what do I consider the summary on this? Overall, again, I love the logo. I think it's very clean. I think it's distinctive. For the website itself, as soon as it downsizes, it's definitely a bit too small. There isn't a consistency in color, especially the call to action on the home. What are Dow Oak's colors? I've got no branding of that. Mine is a particular orange that's used. I know some others that use greens, reds, browns, and all that. Pick a palette. In this case, with the logo being, truly, I believe this is just black or super dark of something. Stick with that. But then make sure your menu, your call to actions, your hot spots relate to your brand color. So if you don't have a brand color, choose something. Kind of go over the ideas, mess with the colors a little bit to see how they work on the site. And once you find something that works, stick with it. Save that number value. It's always like a hex number value on it. Save that because you always want to use that color. Not only this, your print materials and everything else that could be associated with it. You want to try to keep it as consistent as possible. And again, this whole area is, we need to choose one to up to 3 fonts for your brand. A minimum, I would say 2. I think, again, I'm a proponent for using serif fonts for something like this for the menu, and the logo I think works great. Let's continue on. Anytime you're like in here and repeating, you don't necessarily even need to repeat this. This doesn't necessarily have to be here because it's already there. and I would make that logo bigger as the menu shrinks down. This, I think, is definitely not a good font choice in that regard. All regular case across, rewrite some of your content to be more succinct. Try to stay away from drab. This, unfortunately, is a bit depressing when I look at this. The way that your content is for like your DJ services and all that, I think that could be written a little bit more succinct. Having that menu selection in services, so this way you can just jump right to the page. Whatever makes it easier for a client to find the information that they're looking for, that is exactly what you want to do. And most importantly, and you already start doing it with the front page, but do this for every main page. Get some testimonials that are relevant, truncate them down so there's not a lot to digest, but the most important parts that sells you, especially on that page. Again, I said, when you talk about pricing, if you have somebody talking about how great of a value you were, that's where it belongs. And again, shorten that down so it makes sense. And always put attribution, always say who it was. You already do that for your front page, but make sure you stay consistent with that. Overall, I've definitely seen worse sites, but this is something that can easily be worked in if you spend some of the time and effort. I think the biggest thing on this is going to be the content, kind of shortening things down to get it to a much more, let's get that person to reach out to me. I'm not just trying to just sell the entire process, to sell the entire thing just on website alone. Make it succinct, drop some of the things like equipment, microphone talk, all that training, nice short succinct paragraph of how great your training is. That's it. That's all you need. Keep it short, keep it simple, and I think in the end you have a better website for that. Well, there's a video and I hope you liked it. If so, hit that thumbs up, click subscribe, ding that notification bell, subscribe to my Patreon page. And if you like this video and want to see more, check out my 4 DJs Only playlist and some of the other content that I have on this site.